Jazakallah khair, Dr. Wael. It's hard to follow those somber words, but I know that, subhanAllah, parents are really struggling with what's happening. A lot of them are thinking, like, what's going on in the world? There's, like Dr. Wael said, there's a lot of information out there that's really scaring people. And I just want to say, I think it's a good time to kind of breathe and remember that it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that's in control. We have to take the measures that Dr. Wael was talking about, but it's, subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who created this disease, and he's more powerful than it. And inshallah, if we follow what we need to follow, we can overcome it, and remember the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when I was thinking about this talk, I was thinking about what's really important for us as a parent. And I think when we talk about e-learning, or we talk about having our kids at home, we have to kind of look at our framework and what's our purpose. And sometimes I think it's good to have this kind of forced isolation, because it forces us to kind of look inwards, not only as parents, as sisters and brothers, but also even for our own children. Like, what are our strengths and what are our weaknesses, subhanAllah? What kind of resiliency do I have? How will I help my children build resiliency? Definitely, as the principal of a school, we're really struggling with, the shutdown and having to then put the kids into distance learning. And, what does that look like? What kind of holistic learning realistically are we going to be able to give? And I think the same things that I think about as a principal, it's important for parents to think about. And so when we look at these things, we have to look at the emotional, physical, spiritual, and intellectual needs, not only of ourselves, but obviously our children. And I was thinking about a story, because I know there's a lot of, subhanAllah, there's a lot of funny memes out there now because of this coronavirus, and jokes around parents and what are they going to do with their kids, and, spouses with each other. And I was thinking about the Chinese bamboo tree. So normally when I give a talk, it's interactive, so it's hard to know who knows what I'm talking about. But the Chinese bamboo tree is actually interesting, and I also picked it obviously because of the whole issue with the virus. But these Chinese farmers, what they do is they plant a seed, they toil the soil, they make sure that they're watering and doing everything, and in the first year they see nothing, and they keep doing that, and in the second year they see nothing. And they keep doing that. And in the third year, they still see nothing. And so when we think as parents, the patience that we have, it's really hard to kind of, we want change now with our kids really quickly. So we do something for a few weeks and we're like, well, it's not working. And so I'm saying this story for a reason. And subhanAllah, in the fourth year, same thing. And then in the fifth year, something really weird happens. So for 5 years straight, these farmers do this. And in the fifth year, suddenly within 6 weeks, the tree grows to 80 feet tall. So if you're thinking about the room that you're sitting in right now, if you're, in a nice house, maybe you've got like 9 foot, 10 foot ceilings. The average ceiling is about 8 feet. Think of it 10 times more than that, or 8 times more than that. But did the tree really grow in those 6 weeks? No, right? There was a massive foundation that was happening. And I think of parenting in the same way. So now when you're at home and you're really struggling with being at home with all your children and having to now teach them, and maybe some of you are working from home, some of us are housewives, some of us have jobs, it's a really big struggle. So I want you to kind of remember this story and remember that all of this stuff that you're doing is all foundational for their development, and you're going to see, inshallah, those 80-foot, that 80-foot tree growing. So when we look at our e-learning and screen time, we have to look at things that are what we call developmentally appropriate. And so when we look as educators, and I think as parents, one thing that we're trying to really foster at home with the kids is what we call the learning skills that are important for them to need. So when we look at responsibility, we look at organization, how are they able to do independent work? How are they able to collaborate? What kind of initiative can they be taking? We need to work on their self-regulation. And when we look at things that are developmentally appropriate, we're looking from the ages around 3 to 4, we're looking at children who are starting to learn to read. And then, subhanAllah, they're moving to reading to learn. And you have to look, and by around grade 3 or 4, that happens. And so some of our kids at home are really dependent. We're trying to move them to be semi-independent, and then they move to being dependent. When we're looking at their online identity, up to age 7, kids are basically tethered by an umbilical cord digitally to their parents. And what that means is usually parents control their accounts, they're on their accounts, they usually don't have their own social media. Around 8 to 9 years old is when we see kids kind of start to develop their own identity or their own independent identity. And you'll see this is when the fights start to happen. My daughter's 12 and still arguing, why doesn't she have social media? And so this is where we kind of see these arguments start to happen with parents. And then obviously as kids get older and become teenagers, they obviously have their own independent online identity. A lot of parents have been calling me and asking me how much screen time is okay. When we look at kids under 3, the American Academy of Pediatrics actually recommends zero screen time. And the reason for this is it affects their attachment to their parents. It affects their engagement or their ability to focus. And it also actually affects their speech. So I see so many times I'm out or anywhere, and I see now so many kids that are under the age of 3 having their parents' phones. And I know it's really the easiest thing to do is put a phone in their face or put them in front of a TV or something like that to kind of, quiet them down. But I want you guys to really think about that. So we want to be trying to engage them, trying to think of their holistic development when we're looking at these things. When we look at children who are after the age of 3, and I don't know, they haven't said exactly what age, but obviously not in the teenage age, let's say up to the age of 11, they're actually only recommending around 2 hours a day of screen time. And what that does is because there's a risk for attention deficit. And if we think of even their leisurely time as opposed to their school time, this 2 hours is really not being done, I think, all across the board. And now with everyone being at home and schools, a lot of schools moving to online. I know a lot of the Islamic schools are moving online, and I think that's probably the way the public school system is going to be going. This is a real concern for parents. So how do we balance that? And I think it's really important to have some sort of schedule for yourselves, for your children. I think there needs to be academic time, creative time. There needs to be time for them to be physically active. There has to be a balance, right? They should be, in MAC, we have a program called iRise, and the I stands for integrity, R stands for Rabbaniya, S is service, and then E is excellence. And if you can kind of keep these things in mind, so when I'm planning my kids' days, I'm thinking about what am I doing and what am I talking about with them? What kind of discussions are we having around a muraqabah mindset or thinking of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? This virus is actually a perfect time to have these discussions about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how a lot of times we feel we're so powerful, and subhanAllah, just a small virus, look what it can do. And it is a blessing in disguise. I know it's not a blessing, obviously, for those who are sick, but for us to really have that time with our families, to be able to have halakas, to be able to actually get them away from the screens. And I would recommend that because now we're forcing them, unfortunately, to be on screens for them to do their schoolwork. If we can try to make all their leisurely things, their Islamic stuff, all of these spiritual things around these off the screens, I think it would be really important. The last thing, and I know I always speak over time, I'm not sure if I am over. Sana, I'll wait for Sana to give me the nod or not. I think there's some things that we need to consider as parents when we're talking about screen time. So the first thing is, what rules does your family have around your media use? And I think there has to be rules. And this is a really big thing. A lot of parents will ask me, what do I recommend? But I'm going to give you kind of some things to think about, and you guys obviously are going to make up your own rules. So what kind of content is allowed to be viewed or accessed? When is it going to be allowed? For how long? I would highly recommend, even for your teenage children, that they do not have their devices in their rooms overnight. I really recommend that the devices be charged in your rooms. If you have the ability to turn off the internet, we do that here because my husband is a techie. If you can turn off the internet even at a certain time, I think that's very, very important. Talking about digital citizenship. So also that's part of the rules. How do we engage online? Talking about bullying, because a lot of them will chat with each other, and Islamic behavior, and keeping those things in mind. And the concept of Rabbaniya, always thinking of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because a lot of times when we're online, we're forgetting that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there watching what we're doing. The second question that parents should be asking is, what kinds of personal devices are families, basically members, allowed to have or to use, right? And so, we're looking at, now there's a big pressure, obviously, to have certain, level of iPhone or, different things like that. Those discussions need to happen too with the family. Don't forget, screen time also includes TV. It's not just phones, it's your iPads, it's your laptops, it's all of these things. So it's really easy to kind of go above the time and really affect your children's development. The third is, how does using screens affect our communication time as a family? So, rules around, like at dinner time or when we're eating, or now it's time that we're having a discussion, or, doing board games. Like, that's a big thing. Board games, card games, like, get them outside. I know the social distancing is important. You can, have them play in the backyard, for instance, away, take a walk in nature. All of these things are really important for us to be thinking about. So when are these devices allowed? Also, how are these screens helping us achieve our parenting goals, right? So we need to have goals for our kids. We need to look at their strengths and weaknesses. We need to have plans around how are we gonna, those learning skills that I was talking about. How am I gonna foster responsibility? How am I gonna foster them being organized? How am I gonna foster them being independent? So, how am I going to foster their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or their concept of excellence? All of these things you need to be thinking about, because a lot of times screens aren't helping that. Sometimes they can be, because you can use them appropriately, but you need to be thinking of these things. And then the last question I would say is, how are screens affecting our child's academic performance, right? And are my children enjoying reading books? Are my children actually enjoying being creative? It's very difficult to be creative when they're always on the computer or they're always on their screens. One thing that we did is take those things away for a while, and you would be shocked at, how much quality time the siblings were spending with each other, playing games, enjoying each other. So I've taken up enough time. I know, inshallah, there's going to be questions, but hopefully these are a few things that you guys can think about. I know Dr. Ihab is going to be speaking more from the Islamic spiritual perspective, but I would say, please, everyone, this is the perfect time to have these conversations around Islam and Allah, and what is our purpose and our goal in life, and really a really good opportunity to be at the service of people and the service of others, and get our families all into this. And I know Mac has some programs, I'm sure Sana will be talking about, that people can get involved with, like the food share program or the blood drive, different things like that. This is a great opportunity to give back to our communities and get our kids involved in that. Jazakallah khair.